yeah, I don't know why I make this such a big deal. The stakes don't need to be so high. Just, in my last video, I opened up about my conviction of sin moment and getting back to my faith. And for people, oh, my little doggy's coming in to visit. Okay, so after that happened, and after I couldn't deny that something life-changing had happened, and because it focused so much on the concept of sin, I kind of became obsessed with that because it was something that I was so against my whole life. Like, I'm not a sinner. They use sin to like keep you oppressed and in a state of guilt and shame. Sin's not real. And then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, sin might be real. I'm thinking that sin's real. And it actually, the knowledge of that and awareness of it could possibly really help people when it comes to living well and being good, genuinely good, genuine salt of the earth people, right? I guarantee you each of those people would be like, yeah, I'm a sinner. It's just a sense I get. So the book I'm going to be reviewing today is GIittering Vices, a new look at the 7 deadly sins and their remedies. Because I was like, the 7 deadly sins, where did those come from? How did they start? What, like, the history of anything according to that, I want to know. Okay, so today actually will be less about sin and will be a little bit more about vices, the vices. But don't you worry, eventually I'm gonna be talking about sin, because then after becoming like obsessed by it and wanting to know more, which is kind of what I do, I read these 2 books, 7, it compares the 7 deadly sins to the Beatitudes. And it was really good. And then this, a breviary of sin, not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, there was so much in this that I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I never thought about this that way. I never saw this from, I just never knew. I was so defensive because this world wants to like turn you away from things that can help you sometimes and seduces you into things that will destroy you spiritually and emotionally and psychologically. All right, vices, those little tyrants, am I right? Those perennial zones of human weakness, those well-entrenched, willful habits of resistance, that is what they are. And you know what they say, a vice is pretty much a habit, and bad habits or bad vices are like a warm bed, easy to get into, hard to get out of. If you've ever tried to tame the beast that is yourself, you know what I'm talking about. You've got wrath, gluttony, envy, lust, sloth. The chapter on sloth blew my mind. That's 6. Pride. I said greed, avarice, greed. Horace once said, our dear ancient friend Horace, that to flee vice is the beginning of virtue. And a lot of modern people, it seems, don't care about virtue, being virtuous. I think we need to make that a thing again. There's that quote from, I think, John Adams, and then a bunch of other people have said things that supported it. But it was basically like only a virtuous people are capable of being truly free and governing themselves. You know, because if you're not virtuous, technically, emotionally, and psychologically, you're kind of like a child. You just do what feels good. And children need parents. And I think that's what everybody turns the government into. I also just feel like there's wisdom here. It's so funny because when you bring up sin or vice, people are like, get that away from me. That's so harmful to humans. But then there's those same people will be like, oh my gosh, though, the mental health issues, the mental health, it's a big problem. And you're like, well, yeah, because your mental health is part of your soul apparatus. And if you've got a bunch of stuff, icky stuff in your soul, then you're going to have mental health issues. So maybe we should talk about soulful and spiritual things again, so we don't get slaughtered by the circumstances of modernity. And just in the preface, she says, advertisers rarely give us a picture of what we should reject. They craft their messages based on a key insight into human nature. So they know it. The people manipulating our minds via the tech know it. Okay. They know that what draws the human heart and fuels the human spirit is love of something good. We are moved, powered, and captivated by a glimpse of something in front of us that we long for wholeheartedly. So she'll go on to say that the vices, the longing for all of these things is not in itself wrong, because that's how we're built. But the vices are distorted. It's where that longing gets taken and it gets distorted and disordered. You know, so like, it's not a bad thing to really appreciate money, to love the options that it can give you, the generosity it enables you to be. But it's when it becomes the main drive, not what you can do with it necessarily, but just like having it for yourself, disordered and distorted. So it's not about becoming a moral hypochondriac and being like, man, all of these, I struggle with them so hard. But just benefiting from some deeper moral reflection and just taking stock every now and then, not becoming navel-gazing like I did my whole 20s because I was searching for my self-esteem. But just to be like, whoa, I'm feeling envious of this person. And then checking yourself and then, you know, working on that and slaying the demons one by one. But it is good to ask, what is worth keeping and defending from the past? Something that humans have been using as a spiritual tool for thousands of years? Do you want to throw that away? You want to just remove vice and sin from our entire vocabulary and vernacular and substitute all these psychological and therapy words? It's not helping. The issues aren't getting better. All right, differences between vice and sin. They're roughly used synonymously. They are a little different. A vice, or its counterpart, a virtue, which is really cute that for each vice we have the antidote, right? You have something to work toward. A vice is a habit or a character trait. Unlike something we are born with, we can cultivate habits or break them down over time through our repeated actions. Yeah, because ultimately, as the Greek philosopher Aristotle puts it, we are ultimately responsible for our character. Virtues are excellences of character, habits or dispositions that help us live well. Great. Okay, vices hurt us, virtues help us. Vices eat away at our ability to see things clearly, to appreciate things as we ought, to love and live in healthy relationships with others, and to refrain from self-destructive patterns of behavior. All right, so the capital vices, which are the sources of sin. So I think in philosophy in Greece, there was already some virtue formation for achieving self-perfection. So there was already some kind of acknowledgement that we need to have a program to become better, because inherently we have so many vulnerabilities to become bad. But for the first millennia of their use, the vices, the 7 vices structured self-examination practices and catalyzed lifelong spiritual formation. They're called capital vices. Capital comes from caput, the Latin caput, Capitis means the head, but in this way it's meaning it's the source or the fountainhead. Vices that serve an ever-bubbling wellspring of many others. Any pollution in that source eventually poisons the land downstream. Love an analogy. Cassian called them principal vices because they were principia, first principles, deeper origins of further sins and the damage that they leave behind. So the capital vices name the set of vices that grow out of pride and tend to proliferate additional sin. So in the Middle Ages or medieval days, they had these beautiful old vice trees and then the opposing virtue tree. And my dog's whining, hang on. Okay, where was I? So they had these trees, which is such a great analogy. And for the vice tree, the trunk that led down to the roots was always pride, right? Because the prideful can do no wrong. They're justified in whatever. They're moral relativists and they don't answer to anything or to anyone, and they're prideful. And that's what kind of creates the base of all of the other different vices. Whereas the counterpart tree, the virtue tree, it's always humility. And the thing to remember is that the way that sin works in us is it's organic and dynamic. Vice and sin don't just sit there in an isolated corner of your heart, inert and lifeless. They grow and produce fruit, just as the tree of virtues rooted in Christ produces the fruit of the Spirit. Oh yeah, duh, pride was the original sin. Can't forget that. So originally also, the vices were because of the desert fathers and mothers, the early Christians who renounced the world and they'd go out into the desert and they noticed the same things that would happen internally for all of them, the same core temptations. And that's where they sort of came from. And there were originally 8. Vainglory was one, which is a word that is so funny that we don't use anymore, really, even though our entire culture is vainglorious. But then ultimately they moved vainglory into pride because 7 was such a powerful number. So it became the 7 rather than the 8. Even just her short descriptions of the vices. Okay, so vainglory, image is everything. Envy, feeling bitter when others have it better. Sloth, acedia. Acedia is the Latin word for it, I believe. Resistance to the demands of love. That chapter was like a ton of bricks for me. Avarice, possession and mastery. Wrath, holy emotion or hellish passion. Gluttony, feeding your face and starving your heart. Lust, sexuality stripped down. And I've been very open about my own issues with lust, my malformed sexuality, that with God's grace, I don't have that issue anymore, which feels free. And it could try to come around again. This is the whole point, this is like a lifelong, as long as you're a human with a human heart, you're vulnerable to all these different things. But, you know, hopefully when you conquer one, you have some kind of automatic defenses that come up if it tries to come into your life again and mess with you. Because it really did mess with me. The vices exercise such attractive power because they parody happiness so well. The goods they promise look so much like true human perfection to us. As Augustine says, specious vices have a flawed reflection of beauty. They offer an easy shortcut and a recipe for self-made satisfaction. And in a twisted way, our pursuit of the vices shows us attempting to attain goods like love and friendship, provision and security, recognition and approval, comfort and pleasure, status and worth, all by ourselves and often all for ourselves. And when vices distort our character, we seek these goods, and they are genuinely good things, in a misguided or even idolatrous manner, in the wrong way, at the wrong times, and the wrong places, too intensely, or at the expense of other things of greater value. And that is what makes the vices evil. Our values are all misaligned. Our loves are disordered. Envy was pretty much one of the main reasons, aside from just too much information and too much discord and everybody kind of fighting and arguing. The reason I got off Instagram was because of envy and covetousness, wanting other people's vacations. Oh, look at their house. Oh, look at, her clothing. I love that necklace. I want her wardrobe. Her baby, like all of it. And I was like, this is not good for me to be thinking so much about what others have or what they are capable of achieving. So I'm off. In Thomas Aquinas' analysis, envy also counts as a type of sorrow. We might translate that term today as a pang of resentment or an inward cringe. And then of course it goes into the comparison game. That wasn't even focused. Like, I just did this and didn't even focus it. Apologies if this video is very messy. I'm not really that put together. I watch a lot of essays on YouTube, which I probably need to cut down on because I'm just feeling the tech-induced brain rot. The digital dementia is kicking in and it's just like, oof, it's too much. I gotta go touch grass way more. Yeah, my videos probably for a while are gonna be really all over the place and not very curated and neat. Ooh. When circumstances force the envious to confront what they judge to be their own lack of worth, their unhappiness and grief can be unbearable. And then that feeling of like the unbearableness of just feeling like you're leads to all sorts of escape routes via drinking, which was the main one, via watching prawn. I don't know if you can say the word on YouTube, but that, between drinking and that for a long time, those were my escape mechanisms. And sleeping. Sleeping. Which is what I thought sloth really was all about. No. It goes so much deeper. The sloth chapter, I keep saying it, it really hit me. According to one confessional manual, envy betrays itself with a variety of symptoms. Feeling offended at the talents, successes, and good fortune of others, selfish or unnecessary rivalry and competition, pleasure at others' difficulties or distress, ill will, reading false motives into others' behavior, belittling others, false accusations, backbiting, slander, the initiation, collection, and retelling of gossip, arousing, fostering, or organizing antagonism against others, scorn of another's abilities or failures, teasing and bullying, ridicule of persons, institutions, or ideals, and prejudice against those we consider inferior or who consider us inferior or who seem to threaten our security and position. So there's a lot there to think about. This book really was so good now that I'm going back and reading everything I highlighted, which is a lot. Envy silently eats up from the inside. In the words of John Chrysostom, as a moth gnaws a garment, so does envy consume a person. To escape from this vice, we must therefore find a completely different foundation for our self-worth. Which if you don't have a relationship with God, that might be really hard. Chapter 5, Sloth, Acedia, Resistance to the Demands of Love. So everyone always thinks sloth is just laziness. Just wah. I don't feel like it. I don't want to do that because sleep feels better. Sloth opposes the great Christian virtue of diligence, that powerful sense of responsibility, dedication to hard work, and conscientious completion of our God-given duties. What is hard work and dedication at its best but an expression of love and devotion? Sloth, on this view, expresses pernicious apathy, comfortable indifference to duty, and neglect of others' needs. We should label sloth a sin not merely because it makes us lazy, but because of the lack of love that lies behind the laziness, which is what acedia means, is the lack of care. So sloth is more of a spiritual vice. You have the more carnal vices, which would be gluttony because there's possessions, food. You've got greed, which has, you know, things and money and physical stuff. They're the more fleshy, whereas sloth is a spiritual vice. It's something in the heart that's making you not want to engage with what needs to be done in the world via love, with what you can contribute. And think about this like self-obsessed culture that we live in now, where I understand the burnout and the hustle culture is not it. So this, I wouldn't tie this to that. People who are like people pleasers, who really, really go above and beyond and never take care of themselves. I think it's just obvious that you're not supposed to burn yourself out in that way. But this self-care thing that everybody's like, I'm not going to go out and engage and be there for the relationships because I just need to, you know, be by myself and do my self-care rituals 5 nights out of the week. You know, it's like masking selfishness and calling it self-love. And also, this is what's funny, is it's not just apathetic inertia that's sloth. It's people who are too busy to actually acknowledge what is the most important thing to get done, or what needs the most love or attention or care. So apathetic inertia and also extreme busyness, just keeping yourself busy so you don't have to address things, is also sloth. Even though acedia sometimes drags us down with feelings of sadness, like all vices and its symptoms, it and its symptoms ultimately embody the cumulative effect of our own choices. Evagrius, who was an early church father, he was one of the main ones who started the system of vices. He classifies acedia as a spiritual vice because it involves inner resistance and coldness toward our spiritual calling and its attendant practices. Those with this vice experience staying committed to God as an intolerable burden. The chapter on sloth was just very illuminating. So that's the vice I'm working on right now. It feels like a battle internally. All right, this video is going to be kind of long, huh? Okay, the next chapter is avarice, greed. Americans don't struggle with that. Am I right? She brings up the consumerist version of this cycle. First we over-acquire and then we over-trash. She talks about the heart of the giver. Virtues and vices concern the condition of our hearts. Generosity's measure is not how much is given away in terms of the flat amount, but rather the way it is given and why it is given. And so avarice will more likely than not make you want to hoard and not give, or give for reasons so that others will owe you and keep them in a state of indebtedness, or all sorts of funky motives. Thomas Aquinas assumes that the point of owning stuff is to use it for the sake of serving others. I mean, think about that, especially for Americans. You own things just so you can have them. Do you look at your paycheck that way? How much of the income we use to upgrade our own lifestyle could and should be used to meet others' needs? Now, this is a big deal also. And everybody, I feel like, would chime into this with being like, yeah, but the cost of living, I have to use everything in my paycheck. This is not about that. And here's the thing, and I really believe this: if communities refocused on the locality of like loving your neighbor and pooling resources and being generous, we wouldn't need government so much, which is everybody's answer. And I'm gonna stand firm on this, and people will be like, I don't love government. I want as little government as possible. I want communities to be thriving and healthy and functional. My answer is never, well, the government needs to give me. Like, I understand that's easy, and that because the damage that's been done with governments, that maybe we feel like we're owed. But I just think government is a beast that can't be trusted. So you might as well form a network of people with good hearts that you can pick up the phone and call when you need help. To give is to offer the world a picture of God's heart. Another thing about this book are the questions for reflection. What makes it so difficult to give things away? What drives acquisition of and attachment to material goods? These are questions that I think each person needs to know for themselves. Like, why do I have a hard time giving? Why do I want so many things? The exact reason. Reshaping our desires and correcting our myopic view of where money is from and what money is for. And once you go down the rabbit hole of the Federal Reserve and you realize how freaking stupid our whole money system is, that even blows your mind even more. I digress. The amount of rabbit holes I've gone down in the last 5 years is also probably has not helped my sloth, to be honest. Oh, because we invest our egos and identities in the things we earn and buy and then just count them as our own. Do we possess our possessions, or are we possessed by them? See, there's just a lot of food for thought. Okay, so that's avarice. Wrath. Wrath is not one I struggle with a lot, because I've always intuitively kind of known that when you lose your cool, then you give your power away. I've always felt that having tantrums was not the good thing to do. But don't worry, I have arguments, invisible arguments with people I'm irritated with in the shower in my head, when I could be doing so many other things with my mind. We express this emotion when something interferes with what we expect or feel we deserve. The emotion of anger, like fear and shame, haunts our hearts at the depths where we have buried our hopes and hurts. And to confront our anger, we must enter territory fraught with difficulty, for we guard both ourselves and whatever our anger protects with great defensiveness, which usually is a fear of inadequacy or insecurity. Angry people are feeling probably very unstable. When we examine anger more closely, puzzles arise. Is anger always a spiritually toxic emotion, or can it sometimes be a fitting response to evil? Excellent question. Isn't it morally good to feel righteous indignation, or are we just self-deceived and self-righteous rationalizers? There is nothing that can be done with anger that cannot be done better without it. And I do kind of agree with that. Here's a good tidbit. The goal of restraining or tempering anger is to keep reason's judgment clear. How many times have you seen someone that you know, or seen someone and they see red and they black out, and it's like, well, you weren't really in control, were you? That's probably not ideal. Gluttony is the next one. The beginning of the chapter is a quote by Frederick Buechner, great writer. A glutton is one who raids the icebox for a cure for spiritual malnutrition. To understand this form of gluttony, it's important to realize that what we eat, not just because food tastes good, but also because we desire the satisfaction of feeling full. We want not only to taste what we eat, but also to fill ourselves and be filled by it. To defeat emptiness, so to speak. Gluttony's insatiability thus stands opposed to godly contentment and gratitude. And as human beings, we are made to find our flourishing in something more than temporary physical pleasures. Fulfilling our desire for the pleasure of eating doesn't fill up the whole person. It leaves our desires for spiritual goods, love, friendship, identity, belonging, or meaning, empty. Hence our compensatory eating of comfort foods And here's the truth: to be wary of the cumulative effect of indulged desire. If you can be aware of the desires you're indulging and how they're compounding what they're creating, that helps. There's a whole little subsection on you are what you eat, which is something that I've heard many times. But that just isn't what you eat, that's also consuming. So that's why info glut is such a thing, which I have felt that. I don't necessarily have an issue with food. I had it with alcohol and I have it with information, and it has the same effect. How hard would we find it to give up something for, say, a month, or to do so without complaint? Whether we practice them regularly or occasionally, disciplines of attachment reliably reveal where our excessive attachments, selfish preoccupations, idols of identity, and disordered loves lie. I think I need to do a Substack fast. I'm reading way too many articles, you guys. All right, and I think this is the last one. The last one is lust, which hits close to home. That was my main one for a long time. We can't define lust as damaging or disordered pleasure seeking unless we can identify a well-ordered, delightful form to which it fails to measure up. Degrading sexual pleasure into meaningless triviality or animal instinct, stripped of any relation to love and humanness. We should treat our sexual desires and their expression as holistically human, both spiritually significant and earthly embodied. For the mind is a thing easily set in motion and difficult to check in its tendency toward unlawful fantasies. The amount of fantasy, I mean, look at Twilight and look at 50 Shades of Grey. That movie did so much damage, I think. And at the time, you know, I was so into it, me and all my girlfriends. And I just think about what that book and film actually did for young girls then going out and seeking those types of sexual experiences. It feels very dark. Perhaps they feel desperately lonely and use sexual pleasure as a superficial panacea. I honestly, I've heard that word before and I have no clue how to say it. Let's just look that up really quick. Because this is the thing that I'm saying about digital dementia and info glut is there are many things now that I've looked up over and over again and I'm just not retaining things. Panacea, a remedy for all disease or ills. An answer or solution for all problems or difficulties. Okay, let's read that again now, shall we? Perhaps they feel desperately lonely and use sexual pleasure as a superficial panacea, but quickly find themselves blindsided by the power of the desire they've awakened. Our concern here is how those choices accumulate into a current of habits that then sweep out of control. How do unruly sexual desires deform our character, our perception, and our emotions? Great questions. There's so much more, but my battery's gonna die. It gives you ways to combat the vices, which is why this book is really great. And I recommend it because I think that this is wisdom that needs to be kept around because it doesn't seem to really change. Human nature is not gonna change. And we're prone and vulnerable to the same corruptions and hurts. So arm yourself because you have as many masters as you have vices, and until you conquer those, you're not truly free. You know, I didn't make up the masters and vices. That was a quote from Augustine that I just said. So, yeah. This video is gonna be, I gotta post it. I told myself you cannot be a perfectionist. Whatever comes out, you gotta post. So I'm gonna post this. All right, bye.